Thanks, Alex. It's so strange to be visiting JNS, right? I mean, JNS is my home, so thank you very much for such a warm homecoming. Thank you all for coming. Isn't JNS amazing? It just shows that when you have the truth behind you, you grow. The truth is one of the best items you can try to sell. You know, if you're trying to sell something, selling the truth, like nothing beats it in terms of products. And we have an amazing truth to tell, we the Jewish people. You know, we meet now this week in Jewish calendar and Israeli calendar. We have 2 periods of 10 days that are the days of awe. The 10-day period between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And then the second period is now. It's between Yom HaShoah and Yom HaAtzmaut. And of course, before Yom HaAtzmaut, we have Yom HaZikaron. And I think that the confluence of these 10 days that we are in the midst of right now, is supposed to serve as a guidepost for us as a people here in the land of Israel, in the state of Israel, and because it tells us something very clear about where we were, who we are, and what we celebrate. And where were we? We were in a position where no matter how much will we had, we lacked the capacity to defend ourselves against people who hated us. The Jewish people are the eternal people. But just as we're the eternal people, anti-Semitism is the eternal hatred. And 80 years ago, we didn't have the capacity to do anything about the genocidal hatred of the Nazis and all of their collaborators in Europe, Africa, and beyond. So we were annihilated. A third of our people was annihilated. And we start this period of the Days of Awe remembering that, because as the Prime Minister said many times, I'm not sure if he said it in his masterpiece of a speech last night, but the point of Zionism wasn't to end anti-Semitism. We can't end anti-Semitism. It's not up to us. We're not the ones who suffer from anti-Semitism. We can't reason somebody out of something they weren't reasoned into, and it's not who we are. They try to define us, but we know who we are. And the point of Zionism is not to eradicate anti-Semitism. It's to eradicate the ability of anti-Semites to harm the Jewish people. I'll just repeat it. The purpose of Zionism is to prevent the anti-Semites from carrying out the genocide of Jewry that they aspire to commit. We learn it every year. We say it at the Pesach Seder. In every generation, they rise up to destroy us, but God saves us. God and ourselves, our power. And the purpose of Zionism is to prevent the eradication of the Jewish people at the hands of anti-Semites. And on Yom HaZikaron, L'Chalalei Marachot Yisrael, we celebrate, we revere, we embrace the memory of those who gave their lives defending us against anti-Semites, defending us against people who wanted to eradicate us, who seek our eradication. And of course, on Yom HaAtzmaut, we celebrate our freedom, knowing full well that the implications of that freedom is that we managed to survive the onslaught of anti-Semitism in our time, thanks to the sacrifices of our fighters who fought to protect us, who fight still today to protect us. Right now, we're in the midst of these 10 days of awe, during a great war for our survival, a war that the government named the War of Redemption. And what is it that we're trying to redeem in this war? What is it that we're trying to accomplish in this war? Well, obviously, we want to redeem our hostages. And as the Prime Minister said last night, so far, we have brought home 196 out of 251 hostages. 147 of them came home alive. And we're seeking to redeem the remaining 59 hostages. About up to 24 of them are alive. and bring them home. We also want to redeem ourselves of our past. We want to redeem ourselves from 30 years of basically basing national policy on forgetting the lessons of these 10 days of awe, of not paying attention to them and not placing them at the centerpiece of our policy making, not recognizing that anti-Semitism is, at its base, annihilationist, that anti-Semites don't just seek to subjugate the Jews, they seek to eradicate Judaism, which is why since the Romans to the Palestinians, they seek to erase our history. So that we forgot that. We based policy since Oslo on this idea that the Palestinian hatred of Israel is not implacable, that it's possible to appease them, that it's possible to give them land, give them legitimacy, give them arms, give them money, Judea and Samaria, give them control over the population centers there, give them Gaza, start discussing Jerusalem, all this in the framework of the Oslo Accord, which recognized the PLO, a terrorist organization whose sole purpose in existing is to eradicate Israel and Jewish history, to accept them as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. I was in the talks when I was in the army, and it was extraordinary the lengths that the leaders of Israel went through in order to ignore every single thing that the Palestinians were saying among themselves. Because what they were telling us all along was that they are implacable. And there were so many tells, obviously, the funding of terrorism, the conduct of terror, the incitement of terror, but there were two main tells that were the most important. The first tell was that they never recognized the legitimacy of the state of Israel, ever, under any circumstance. At any time, they recognized the existence of the state of Israel, but not the right of the state of Israel, the Jewish state, to exist. And the second thing that they did was they taught their children to aspire to conduct a genocide of Jewry. And this was true in the Palestinian Authority, this was true in the Palestinian Authority run by Hamas, run by Fatah. They all were saying the same things, and they were all teaching their children the same things, the same textbooks, the same hatred, not only in schools, but in mosques, in hospitals, and everywhere. And we kept telling ourselves, yes, but everything will change after the final status. Literally, these were statements that were made by generals in the Israeli army back in the 1990s when I was in. And we heard echoes of that in the statements that were made by security chiefs before October 7th, that Hamas was deterred, that they just wanted a better life for their people. They had the plan to invade Israel. They thought it was nothing because Hamas is deterred. They said it. And so we had this idea for 30 years that an implacable foe who organizes itself around hatred of Jews and a desire to wipe us off the map could be appeased. We have to redeem that past. We have to redeem ourselves of those mistakes. And we are. We are. We are eradicating Hamas in Gaza. We are destroying their ability to wage war against us. We are not permitting the continued fable that the Palestinian Authority is a peace partner to become some sort of centerpiece of a post-war Gaza. It's not going to happen. And we're done with talking about a two-state solution. We're done. You can't have a two-state solution when one of the sides doesn't respect the state that already exists, doesn't accept the fundamental legitimacy of the Jewish state. Nothing has changed from the time of the Mufti. As the Prime Minister said last night, not a thing has changed, not except that the educational system has become even more anti-Semitic. And we know this. Why? How do we know that this two-state solution is dead? Well, because we had a control group, right? You know, the Prime Minister back in 2005, he did everything from his position as finance minister to oppose Sharon's plan, his harebrained plan, to leave Gaza, lock, stock, and barrel. Oh, they won't make a deal with us, so we'll just pick up our marbles and leave. We'll exhume our graves. We'll destroy every single community in the Gaza Strip, and then they're going to see, wow, That was fantastic of the Jews to do that. We don't hate them anymore. We're going to take all of this aid money that the international community is giving us and the greenhouses, etc., and we're going to turn Gaza into Singapore. And what did they, lo and behold, do? What the millions of people who warned against us said they would do. They turned Gaza into Afghanistan. Right? That's what they did. And they turned it into hell from 400 subterranean miles of tunnels whose sole purpose was the commission of genocide. Right? That's all they did. They had a state. We gave them a state. The first sovereign Palestinian state existed for 18 years, from 2005 until 2023. It was there. And everything that they got, they used to build a machine of annihilation of Israel. And then we got October 7th, and we saw what happens when they get to use it. This is the end state of a Palestinian state, genocide. You can clap, I guess. So we have to redeem that past, and we redeemed that past by saying we're going to win this war. As the Prime Minister said, we're going to annihilate Hamas. They won't be here. Get our men back. And we're going to implement the Trump plan to give the people of Gaza a chance to make their future somewhere else if that's what they want to do. First good plan I've heard in decades. And we're not going to let another Palestinian state be built in Gaza, not in Judea and Samaria, not in Jerusalem. That's over. It's done. But we have to think about something else that we lost over 30 years of ignoring the lessons of the Holocaust. The other thing that we lost was our ability to tell the world our story, the truth. Because if you're saying that you're for a two-state solution, or even just not saying this is garbage, it's not going to happen, this is building a genocide machine, then how can you defend yourself? Because if the problem in the Middle East, as President Clinton once said, if 99% of the problems of the Middle East would be solved if the Palestinians got a state, then who's responsible for the absence of peace in the Middle East? We are. Right? We are, because we're not coughing up Judea and Samaria, we're not coughing up Jerusalem, and it's all our fault. We're the ones blocking the peace train, aren't we? If everybody who's anybody knows that the only way to solve the problems of the Middle East is to establish a Palestinian state, and we're the ones blocking that Palestinian state from being established because we keep having all of these, we're sticking points, security, Israel's security interests, then we're in the wrong. How do we defend ourselves? How do we defend ourselves? How do we tell our story? When we keep saying, yes, of course we want peace, we want a Palestinian state, we're willing to do this, but only if A, B, and C apply. So here's the thing. We weren't telling our story, which is the truth. We weren't saying that there is literally not a nation on earth that has a stronger right to its homeland than the Jewish people. Not one. Not one. The whole concept of a nation state was built here. It was built here. We gave that idea to the nations of the world because we were the first sovereign nation state. In fact, we were the first people who defined ourselves as a nation. We did it at Mount Sinai. And we didn't tell this story, not in a really comprehensive way, not without apologies and clearing of the throats, because we were stuck. And it wasn't because we all wanted to. Ask my boss. It's because when everybody who is anybody says that this is all you can have, this is the best you can hope for, this is what you're supposed to aspire to, then how are you supposed to be able to tell your story and say, no, that's not who we are and that's not what we aspire to? You can't. You're stuck. You're stuck in a policy position that keeps you constantly on the defensive. And we're done with that too. We're done. Part of redeeming ourselves in this war is saying we're done making excuses for people who want to kill our children. We're done. We want to redeem ourselves. We want to justify the sacrifice of the people whose graves we will visit this week. They didn't die so that we could go around saying, yes, but on the one hand and on the other hand. No, they died so that this country would go forward and win. Now, what happened while we were clearing our throats for 30 years? So the majority of Israelis know that this is garbage. You know, you talk to anybody on the street and the old metaphorical taxi ride and everything like that. Israelis get it. We know who we are. Right? My father-in-law, he didn't come from Morocco because he was reading Herzl's Jewish State. He was going to Israel because he said the Amidah 3 times a day. And the Amidah says, "V'techazena einenu b'shuvcha leTzion b'rachamim," and we will live to see the return of your mercy to Zion. Zionism is Judaism. A Jewish state is established. Obviously, it's time to come home. Duh. So we are done, and we are out here, and we are telling everybody this is our land. Our land legally, our land historically. It's ours. All of it. I don't want to talk to you about Iran. Lots of people talk to you about Iran. I'll just say one thing. The mullahs hate Jews, but they're also smart. They know that if they put Israel #1 on their target list, and people east, west, north, south who don't particularly like Jews say, oh, well, have at it, or let the Jews deal with it. I remember this one extraordinary statement that Hillary Clinton made in the Democratic primary in 2008. I had to talk about it in an NPR interview or something. And everybody, the Jews in Philadelphia where she was speaking, were all pumped up by it. She said, if Iran nukes Israel, we'll nuke Iran. And everybody started cheering. And I'm listening to this, and I said, did you miss something? What? Did you hear the first part of her sentence? And that's the concept. When we're #1 on the target list, we'll take care of it. Well, we're #1 on the target list, and as the Prime Minister said, we're not going to let that happen. But I think it's important to note that it's not just the anti-Semitism here. It's also we have to pay attention to the fact that it always starts with the Jews. A lot of people were willing to countenance Hitler and his desire to take over the world because he was talking about the Jews. A lot of people didn't like us. So they heard him saying that the Jews would not exist anymore in Europe, and they thought, that's good. And they didn't realize what the implications were of the Jews being #1 on the target list were for them until they found out. So we're #1 on Iran's target list, fine. But the distance between #1 and #2 is not years, it's minutes. When you have ballistic missiles, you don't measure time between #1 and #2 in months or years, you measure it in seconds. And it's very important that that be clear as well. The Jews, I don't know whether you'd say we woke up on October 7th. Some of us woke up. Some of us have been awake the entire time. Regardless, I think that we are redeeming ourselves because as we look towards Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, and as we marked Yom HaShoah last week, I think that the overwhelming majority, say almost the absolute majority of Israelis, understand fully in the midst of this war of redemption where we were in the Holocaust, where we were on October 7th, who we are, and what we celebrate. And we're not going to lose that understanding anytime soon. And we're going to remove all the obstacles that stand in our way to securing our future as Jews, as the people of Israel, as Israelis, for ourselves and for Jews all over the world, under the leadership of the man I am so privileged to call my boss, Prime Minister Netanyahu. and by the grace of God and the most heroic soldiers on the face of the planet. And as my boss says, together we will fight, and together, with God's help, we'll win. Am Yisrael Chai, Chag Sameach.